Okay, funny story. When I signed up to do this, I thought I was bringing my favorite books. I'm like, oh my god, I got this book that I just love. And then I realized, well, these are middle schoolers, so I probably don't want to pitch a book that's like massively inappropriate. So, I realized this about 10 minutes ago. So I'm like, oh dear god, I have to find a book that I can talk to middle schoolers with. So, the first one I found in the library that I actually really did love, and I actually read it this summer, was White Fang. You ever read White Fang or seen the movie?
No.
Well, we can pitch it real quick, but I think it's kind of interesting. One of the things I love about White Fang is I loved it when I was a kid, but then I reread it as an adult, and I loved it for different reasons. So in that regard, I think it's really neat. You ever done that where you read a book,
Yes.
you know, and later in life you read it, and you read it for different reasons? So like, for instance, when I was reading it, this time this summer, my daughter and I read it together. The one thing that kind of made me interested, for those of you guys who took history last year for 7th grade, remember the whole thing about domestication of animals?
Yeah.
I kept thinking to myself, who in their right mind would get a wolf domesticated by offering it little nibbles of food? Like, it would kill you, right? So I kept thinking, like, that's ridiculous. You can never get a wolf to like you, no matter how nice you could be. So then I looked at this book, I'm like, this is ridiculous. So like when I was a kid, I looked at it and I loved it for all these different reasons. But now as an adult, I looked at it and I'm like, wait a second, that's not how domestication of animals happened. So I kind of put on like my historian's hat. So it's kind of interesting reading it for a different reason. I've gotten new stuff out of it. But the book I really loved, and actually it's kind of cool because Mrs. Fighter and I, this is like the book that we have in common, because I pitched this book to you about like 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
And Mrs. Fighter just told me that you guys read this book a couple weeks ago, is that right?
They read an excerpt.
An excerpt of it.
They had to write about something that weighed on them.
Right.
Yes.
So I think this is like one of the coolest books ever. I think one of the coolest things about it is that if you don't know if the guy's telling the truth, like it's a whole book of war stories. So as you read it, you're kind of wondering whether or not any of it's real or not. But what I think is really fascinating about it, and you guys need to read this chapter, and the whole book, eventually when you're old enough you could read the whole book, because I think some parts of it are more appropriate than others. But I think the coolest chapter, we talked about this quite a bit, Mrs. Fighter and I, is this kid. He's 18 years old. And you guys are how old now, what? 13 years old, 14 years old, is that right?
11.
You're 12, 13? Okay. So, the fascinating thing to me is that this guy, when he was 18, he was faced with this incredible decision of whether or not he was going to run away from being drafted. You guys know what drafted means?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had this decision to make where he had to decide if he was going to go to war as an 18-year-old kid. So imagine your life 5 years from now, and your government says you got to go to war, you got to go to Vietnam, you got to go fight. Like, that's pretty scary, right? So he's sitting there and he's got this like crazy decision to make. Okay? And I guess what would you do if you were forced to go fight in the war? Would you run away or would you do it? Run away? What would you do? Yeah.
Well, if you run away, or don't they have the right to shoot you then?
So no. If you're like part of the military and you like what's called deserting, like that's like the extreme punishment is to execute people. But I don't think that's happened in like a really long time. But like during the Vietnam War, so these are like people who, let's see, they'd probably be in their 70s now. So anyone here have grandparents like in their 70s and stuff like that? Okay, so that's kind of like their generation. So anyways, this guy is making this decision of whether or not he's going to go and fight the war. And I think the last chapter, or the last paragraph, is maybe my favorite line of the whole entire book. But he's sitting there, he's trying to make a decision. He's on the border of Minnesota and Canada. So if he wants to defect, all he's got to do is get in the boat and go across to Canada, and he'll be safe. He won't have to go to war. That's what a lot of Americans did because they didn't want to go fight. And he said, I was a coward. So what do you think he did?
He drowned himself.
No? What do you think he did? So I didn't finish his sentence. He said I was a coward. Yep.
He probably went on the boat to Canada.
Nope. He said I was a coward. I went to war. So he was too scared of what people would think of him. And what he wanted to do was run away. But the easier decision for him was to just go and do the thing he didn't want to do. So I don't know, I thought that was a really fascinating thing. So, it's cool when you find a book that makes you think and is really powerful and speaks to you. And for me, this book was one of those things that just really spoke to me. So, the things they carried.
Yes, and I did pass that on, and Mrs. Paulson has read it now too.
Ah, good. That's other cool things about books, right? You hand them off and people
Yeah.
get to enjoy them and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
it's very, very cool. Have a good day, everyone.